it's leveled up for sure in all three sports. And it's just the athletes are just, they're swimming that much faster, they're biking that much faster, they're running that much faster. And also is just more aggressive and tactical racing.
And I think that cycling, it might be a little uncomfortable with these triathletes winning their time trial championships, but it shows you, I think, the beauty of triathlon, because the strength of building the engine in the pool without stress, the physical stress would be different in the pool. And also the ability to run and put stress into bone and into tissue that connects to bone, that there might be an upside to a cyclist maybe going for a run every now and then.
Welcome to the TrainingPeaks CoachCast. I'm your host, Dirk Friel. In each episode, we'll sit down with industry experts to discuss coaching methodologies, the latest research, and leading tools for endurance training. Visit TrainingPeaks.com for more training and coaching resources. Today is a special pre-Olympic CoachCast episode with two expert coaches for Team U.S.A, Ryan Bolton and Erin Carson. Ryan is head of performance at U.S.A Triathlon, where he oversees the national and Olympic team training programs. He works in conjunction with each athlete's personal coach, and he also directly coaches a few athletes such as Morgan Pearson, who is racing the individual triathlon in Paris. Ryan himself is an Olympic triathlete, having raced the Sydney 2000 Games. My other guest is Erin Carson, who is a strength coach based in Boulder, Colorado. She works with age groupers and many professionals such as Tim O'Donnell and Mirinda Carfrae, and she also currently coaches Taylor Knibb, who is racing both the individual triathlon and also the cycling time trial in this year's Paris Olympics. In this episode, we talk a lot about preparing for the Olympic triathlon and what the peaking process looks like. Now, obviously, most of us will never compete in the Olympics, yet there are a lot of takeaways in this episode that can be applied to your own training, which might produce significant improvements. Ryan Bolton, thanks so much for joining me on the show today, the CoachCast. Such an honor to have you. I remember 24 years ago when you were prepping for going to Sydney, the very first time triathlon was in the Olympics. And here you are preparing kind of this next generation for the Olympics. So, this is great. I want to know what is your role at U.S.A Triathlon and who are you overseeing for the upcoming Paris Olympics?
Yeah, well, so I am the director of high performance at U.S.A Triathlon, which means that anything, technology and performance oriented, any of those initiatives I'm in charge of, or I help initiate and kind of oversee. So, also in my capacity there is I work directly with some of the athletes. So in this Olympic cycle, the athlete that I actually coach that's going to the Olympics is Morgan Pearson. So, and then of course, the other athletes that have made the team, Seth Ryder, Taylor Knibb, Taylor Spivey, and Kirsten Casper. I know all of them, really well too. And have, been traveling around the world with them for basically the past 8 years or so.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And then obviously you did the Olympics in Sydney. The first time triathlon was in the Olympics. I'm sure you're having flashbacks every 4 years. You kind of go through this cycle yourself. And how does that help you prepare, Morgan Pearson, for example? How do you work with him in terms of I guess the mental side of things? There's so much around the X's and O's of the workout itself, day to day.
For sure.
But it almost comes down to the other, call it 25 hours in the day that really kind of matter. So how are you helping athletes prepare mentally for the upcoming games?
Well, I do think it's helpful having a background, like being there actually as an athlete before, because you understand the demands. And it's interesting because over the past 24 years, the sport has changed and the dynamics of racing at the Olympics have changed. I would say it's faster than ever. It's more aggressive than ever. The bike is definitely more aggressive than the days when I was there. And the technical skills of athletes are significantly higher. So, but there is, like I said, the training component's almost like the easy part, I would say.
Yeah.
That's like, it's like, those are, that's physiology. And, it's incredibly, incredibly important, but for the athletes, having them mentally ready. Actually, I was with an athlete earlier this morning and we were talking about why the Olympics is so special. And it is because it's that event once every 4 years that everyone's been focusing on for 4 years, that everyone's peaking for as well. So, it's not a race where people can be like, oh yeah, I was just kind of, training through that one. No one trains through the Olympics.
Right.
It's like, and I mean, and it's on a world stage, and, both like, athletes understand that importance. And I also think like kind of the final thing that's like really unique about the Olympics is, I mean, it's like, when a kid's 10 years old, they're not like, I want to win, a WTCS race. Like when a kid's 10 years old, they're like, I want to win the Olympics. So there's that additional pressure. But I also feel like, the best athletes in the world are capable. I mean, they almost perform better under those circumstances. They step their game up. For the higher the pressure, the bigger the race, they actually step up even more for races like that. And ultimately, that's what we want to prepare our athletes for. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you probably get a sense of within some of the athletes, like anxiety levels rise more than others.
For sure.
Do you get that sense within each individual athlete and how you might go about?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's interesting because, like, say we have 5 athletes on our Olympic team, and they all have different approaches to, getting there, both from a training and like a mental perspective. And they all have different goals, even at the Olympics, and how they want to approach the races and everything. And it is, as a coach, working directly with one of the athletes, it is like really kind of focusing on those needs of that athlete, and how to manage those needs, and how to make it having them get to the starting line the most prepared physically and mentally that they can. And what's interesting about that, like I said, is every athlete's different. So when you're looking at how the other athletes are mentally or physically preparing, like it takes kind of a different skill set or a different approach and everything. With one of the things that we do with U.S.A. Triathlon is we try to make sure, when our athletes get to the start line, like all of the athletes on the U.S. team, that they have as much knowledge as possible about the course, about the tactics, about the other competitors, and also they're using like the best possible equipment, and, they have all of that information in their back pocket too, so that all they have to do is, start the race and perform at their highest level.
Yeah. How about the visualization side of things, like running through scenarios? So each athlete might run through different scenarios of how the race will develop, and how they react might be at an individual level too.
For sure. And for them, based on their skill set, and also based on, the other athletes in the race's skill set. And the Olympics is unusual in that way too, because, the most of any other federation you have in the race is 3 athletes, and some of the athletes only have 1. And so there's some people who are often at the highest level races that they race against that are not at the Olympics, and it changes the dynamics of the race a little bit. And, and so, thinking about how it will play out that way. But I mean, triathlon's like bike racing, which I know you understand incredibly well. And like, when you talk about how many scenarios can play out, there's about 1,000,001. So, and I mean, we can make our best guess on, like how it will, likely play out and everything, but you have to have athletes both mentally and physically prepared for all case scenarios. And, which, I mean, it's really dynamic. In draft legal racing, it's so dynamic what can happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, through all the Olympic cycles that you've been through, where would you say what makes an Olympian? You have the grit, the mental side, genetics, the training, the X's and O's, the details. Like, what kind of mix of all that really creates an Olympian through your experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always say I feel like to be at the top level, to be at the Olympic level, you have to have 3 things, and you have to have all 3 of them. And I've met a lot of athletes who have 1 or 2 of them, but getting all 3 is hard. And first is what I call the legs, which is physiology, just pure physiology. Like you said, genetics, talent,
genetics.
You have to have that. The other thing, or the second thing I always say, is the head. And what I mean by that is like the mental, like ability to like understand what it takes, understand the dynamics of the racing, like understand the training, like actually kind of like the intelligence quotient of the racing and the training getting into it. And then the third part is the heart. And that's more like the passion, the grit, the drive, and if you have, like I always say, the best athletes in the world have all 3 of those things in spades, and I've met tons of athletes, as of you, who have maybe the mental component, or they have that heart component. They really, really want it badly, or they have the physical component. They're really, really talented. I think that's probably the most common thing. I run into tons of athletes who are insanely talented. But if you don't have the other two things at that incredibly high level too, you're probably not making it, A, to the starting line of the Olympic Games, and B, definitely not to the medal status of the Olympic Games.
Yeah. Well, the toughness, I guess, like you have, every athlete has the really tough days or the extended fatigue, the travel, all that additional stress, just mentally, how to like get through it. And that grit probably has a large part to do with it. And to be able to see the light on the other side, like it's going to get better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's very much there's tons of proverbs about it, but it's basically like suffer now, and later it will pay dividends type stuff. And you have to see that, especially, all of the athletes that are on the U.S. team have been doing this for, 5+ years. And they've all had this vision for 5+ years. And this is the culmination of that vision, which is also kind of like, as you noted earlier, it's what makes the Olympics so special and everything. But you're right. Yeah. Like, Morgan Pearson didn't wake up, 4 weeks ago being like, hey, it's a good idea. I think I want to go win the Olympics. I mean, this has been on his mind, on his training
second
schedule.
Olympics, right?
And it's his second Olympics. Exactly. And it's also Taylor Knibb's second Olympics, and both are medalists from the mixed relay in the last Olympics, which is really cool. So they kind of bring that knowledge, that experience. And then the other 3 athletes are actually first-time Olympians. But the interesting thing about those other 3 athletes is they are very seasoned. Like they've been around the world racing for many, many years. So, one of the piece of advice that I always give to them when they're standing on the starting line at the Olympics, I remember this as an athlete is I remember we were at the Sydney Opera House, is where our race started. And all of the athletes, they lined us up in what would be like the basement of the Opera House. And, and you're standing there in your wetsuit and, and then they're calling you out, onto the pontoon in front of, a giant crowd and obviously like an international TV audience. And I remember just trying to stay warmed up, looking around. And I was like, I know this is no different than any race that I've been doing for the last multiple years, because everyone standing in this line with me on this call out are people who I've been racing against. It's not like it's anyone new or anything. So it's almost like a normal race. It is like a normal race. Like it's all the people you've been racing against. Exactly what their strengths, their weaknesses are and everything. It's just a different stage, of course, being at the Olympics. And the Paris course, as well, is it's such a grand course with what it covers and where it goes and, the iconic landmarks and all that type of stuff. Every corner of that course is incredibly scenic and historic. And it's a pretty special course in that regard.
Absolutely. It's maybe as iconic as the Sydney Opera House. The only reason Sydney's better is that's kind of like the heart of triathlon. You don't say Paris is the heart of triathlon, but you're racing under the Eiffel Tower in this sense.
No, exactly. Yeah. And it is, I know, the Olympic test event was last year, and if anyone watched coverage of that, but it is the starting line of the swim is in the Seine River. And, if you're facing a camera from behind the athletes looking up, the Eiffel Tower is right there. It's pretty spectacular. Yeah. And they're on the Champs-Élysées, both on the bike and on the run, which the Tour de France has made incredibly, famous because, every tour except for this year, as you well know, finishes on that road. And, you go up by the Arc de Triomphe, and it's pretty neat that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Pretty amazing to actually reroute the Tour de France for this. So,
I have friends who are going to Nice because they're like, hey, we want to see the tour finish in Nice, which I was like, that's great.
You brought up the name Taylor Knibb. That is literally no human has done what she has done. Qualify for the triathlon, mixed individual, time trial, road race. That is just unheard of and amazing. Such a great talent that we have, an athlete. How is she going to manage all of that? And what's that week look like for her in terms of the race schedule?
Yeah. It's, it actually flows pretty well. She's not doing the road race. The road race, it's been published that she is in certain places, but she's doing the time trial. So the time trial is almost like a warm up for the individual race. Is the way I'd like to look for it. And it is, it's not super long. It's actually a good push. It's enough, time in front of her individual triathlon race, for it to work, fine. And then she has the mixed relay. The road race, I believe, is the day before the mixed relay. So I know from a timing standpoint, that just wouldn't work, because it probably would be a little bit difficult to bounce back from a 100 plus K, incredibly hard, a road race and everything. But no, I mean, what she's done is incredibly unique. And I think it also speaks to like kind of what you would call like her generational talent. I mean, she is like a very unique individual that way. And, those three components that we were talking about before, like she has all three of those things like in spades. And she, her potential to do well in both the individual time trial and then also in the individual, triathlon race, and then likely the mixed relay is incredibly high too. So, I mean, technically, if she had a fantastic Olympics, she could walk away with 3 medals in 2 different sports, and that would be historic on maybe every level. Yeah.
How many days does she have between the time trial and the individual triathlon?
I believe it's 2 or 3. I need to relook, but yeah. And I'm sure she could tell you exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, it was interesting that, I knew she was capable of doing that, but then when she made the team, I was like, wow.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So how about preparation for the Olympics? What amount of altitude training versus heat training camps?
Yeah.
What is that? Is it same for all the athletes? How are you managing that peaking phase?
So that's a great question. It's different for every athlete, and every athlete has their own prep. Like, once again, at U.S.A, we just try to provide them with the best possible scenario for them and what they're doing. Some of the athletes are based in Europe. Some of them are based in the U.S. And I guess I can speak directly to Morgan since I coach him. But so Morgan is at altitude in the lead up. And then about 2.5 weeks prior to his individual race, there's actually a WTCS race in Hamburg, Germany. So we'll come out of altitude and go to Hamburg and race. It's an individual sprint race, and the next day is a mixed relay, which for him, the philosophy behind that is to keep him sharp, make sure he's sharp, make sure he's race sharp. Morgan really does well, when he does have like kind of just race jitters out of him and everything. So Hamburg is like kind of like a nice, nice way. And even, we've talked about like, expectations of results in Hamburg, and expectation is for him to just race hard, and execute well. Honestly, just execute the race well. I don't really care about the place. And then from there, we go to France. So if you look at, when the races are July 30th, July 31st, he'll be coming off of altitude 20 days out, which is a little long to be coming out. Like if you look at a lot of physiology, but what we're doing from Germany then is we're going to our training camp, which is in Vichy, France. And about half of the Olympic athletes, a little over half of the Olympic athletes will be at that training camp in Vichy. And the other 2 are actually staying at altitude for a little bit longer. Okay. But at that training camp, we have the ability to stay hypoxic in hypoxic rooms if we want to stay at altitude. So we're giving the athletes the option to sleep at altitude in a dorm room that is acclimatized altitude, or drop down. And then it's approximately the entire team then, travels up to Paris about 5 days prior to the race. And at that point, everyone's at sea level, everyone's together. And that's partially because that's when a lot of the U.S. Olympic stuff starts. Like we have to go through processing. Mm-hmm. So the athletes get all their gear in Paris. Yeah. We check into the Olympic Village. And then also, not long after, and then there's the opening ceremonies, which a couple of the athletes want to go through. It's an option. We give them the option to, if they want to or not. And then in addition to that, that is like the course, the athlete briefing, the course familiarizations, all that type of stuff, which going to the Olympics, it's a little bit different. Before big races, it's often a common like scenario. The day before, this is exactly what happens at these times. Whereas the Olympics, there's more than one familiarization, et cetera. And also the athlete briefings have more time in front of them and stuff. So it's a slightly different lead up in that regard. But I guess coming back to your original question is all the athletes have like kind of their own plan, and we just kind of help facilitate what the best plan is until we get to Paris. And then once everyone's in Paris, then we kind of all have the same plan leading up to race day.
Got it.
Yeah.
How about within TrainingPeaks itself? I mean, monitoring this day-to-day recovery, you mentioned race jitters, et cetera, but, are you looking at comments, RPE, mood, like the daily metrics around motivation, mood, any of that type of stuff coming through?
Totally. And I mean, using Morgan as an example, once again, because obviously I have direct access to his account we're looking at, CTL levels and acute training load levels and fatigue levels. We're looking at all of that, kind of on a constant basis. Obviously for Hamburg, he'll come down a little bit, to be resting a little bit, and then we'll get one more punch in, prior to the Olympics. At that point, almost everything is taken care of, but also, via TrainingPeaks, getting those updates on a daily basis. And I actually, Morgan, especially during this time, encourage him, and he's very good at it, commenting in TrainingPeaks, this is what's going on. This is how I felt today. And then it's interesting because our pattern right now, because we are so close to the Olympics, is normally I'll respond via email to his workout, what's going on, because I'm not with him right now. And, like I said, I will be here in about a week and a half. But also then I'll follow it up with a phone call, because just to kind of like check in or a text or whatever, especially, on key workouts and everything. So yeah, communication is high and via TrainingPeaks, and then, beyond that even.
Yeah. So what about yourself during the games? I can't imagine how you're managing very little sleep and all kinds of.
It is, I was in Tokyo at the games, and Tokyo was kind of a different ballgame because of COVID and how regulated, what we could do and everything. I think, Paris will have a little more autonomy, and, we're able to travel around a little bit more, but it's really, really full time. Cause when you're staying in the village, getting out of the village, the U.S. has what we call the HPC, which is the High Performance Center, which is for the U.S. Federation, not just Triathlon Federation, but, all the federations. And it's basically what the USOPC does is they rent a giant facility that has a 50-meter pool and a track and a dining hall and all that type of stuff. It's kind of like a mini Olympic training center in Paris. Wow. And that's where we'll train on a daily basis. That's where we go. We take shuttles there once we're in Paris, because it's a pretty big gap this year between, we arrive, we have 4 or 5 days there, then the individual races, and then we have another 5 days or so before the mixed relay race. So believe it or not, training in Paris is not brilliant. It's not like you can take your bike out, on the road and just go, especially from the Olympic Village. So
indoor training.
Yeah. So we'll be doing a lot of indoor trainers, but it's nice to have access to that track, to that pool, into that area that we go to every day with the athletes. There's also recovery rooms, recovery centers. We bring our physio there, all that type of stuff, and they can get really good food there. In fact, the chef that is there is the same chef that's at the Olympic Training Center in the United States. So some of the athletes who have spent time at the Olympic Training Center, they're familiar with
that's key.
Everything. Yeah, it is. In Japan, it was really key because Japanese food was, is pretty different. And so going to a place where we can get like American food, whereas in France, it's a lot easier. Plus in the Olympic Village, it's pretty international, the food options, but still it's nice to kind of get that at the HPC in the middle of the day. Good food in the recovery center, and they can just chill out. Yeah.
Are those final days in Paris and in between the individual and the mixed already planned out? And if so, how flexible is it, like for each individual athlete training schedule?
They are planned out. We have to identify times in which we're using the HPC and in which we have shuttles going to and from the Olympic Village. The athletes are restricted, to those days and those times. But in the Olympic Village and even, running and that type of stuff, they can do that stuff on their own schedule. The swim times are the most set because we have pool time, of course, but in, track times, if they want track times and stuff, and like eating. So that time is set. So it is, it's been planned out for a while because we have to plan, quite in advance. Cause once again, we're scheduling those times around track and field and U.S.A. swimming and U.S.A. weightlifting and, all these other federations and everything. So you kind of have to, plan accordingly. But the athletes also, they're able to do their own schedule, like as far as cycling and, running that doesn't concern running like on a track and stuff like that. So it's a balance. And once again, every athlete has their own agenda. Although I can tell you, and especially like our group, a lot of them, like I said, these guys, they've traveled around each other. They may have, or around the world together, and they may have different coaches and stuff. But a lot of times when we're at the pool, like we'll even do, they'll just be like, hey, we're hopping in, doing the same swim set and everything just to, do the workouts with each other. And I think in the Olympics, what's unique about it as well is with the mixed relay is like that camaraderie with the team, right. is like really, really important. I mean, obviously they're competing in the individual race, but after that, like, you really, it is team building, and they want really bonding with the team to perform well.
Yeah, that's awesome within the mixed relay how they've introduced that, and like you didn't have that in your day, back in
No,
Sydney.
Exactly. I wish we did.
Yeah, building more of that. Yeah, Team USA is awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, lastly, does every athlete have their individual coach there in Paris with them, or are you also helping coordinate communications with their individual coaches that may not actually be there?
Their coaches are there, and we help their coaches be there, and we get their coaches access to the high performance center. And,
awesome.
But that is like part of my role is just communicating with those coaches and being like, hey, what do you need? And how can we get that? And, and how can we get you here? And if they, like I said, sometimes like a coach will be like, hey, can we, just all hop in this one thing together? And it's like, yeah, we coordinate that and everything. And, there's various levels of collaboration between coaches. Some of them like to collaborate a lot, and some of them are like, fairly independent and everything. But they are all there. When I think of all the coaches, technically there are 4 coaches for the 5 athletes. and fortunately I'm one of them, but so it's, it's just managing those. And like I said, and the coaches have different responsibilities, maybe with other athletes or other federations or, that as well. So it's just kind of balancing that out too. But we do help take care of them if they want, and and we make sure that they have access to the training facilities for sure. That's super important.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What's the biggest difference between when you race the Olympics and the Olympics as they play out now?
Yeah, well, I would say 2 things from a behind the scenes like perspective. It's so much more organized now, and the athletes are so much better supported. Like, me especially, it was the first Olympics, like the staff members that went with us to the Olympics, like they were fantastic and they were incredibly helpful. And, but it was all brand new to them too. And they didn't really know what was going on and everything. Whereas now, like I said, we have a very concrete support infrastructure that's very scheduled, and, the athletes know exactly what's going on. It's very, it's very linear, and it's, like I said, it's kind of designed to make their lives as fluid as possible, so they can optimally prepare for the race. The other difference is like, just once again, I would say the race dynamic, the actual on the racing side of things. Like it's fun for me to be involved at this point. Like I really, even now, 24 years later, like I'm like, oof, it would be fun to be in that race, based on how it's playing out and everything.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, it's leveled up for sure in all 3 sports. And it's just the athletes are they're swimming that much faster, they're biking that much faster, they're running that much faster. And also is just more aggressive and tactical racing. So, yeah.
Right. I mean, Taylor Knibb is the exact example of that, like being able to win outright the U.S.A. cycling time trial national championships as a triathlete just shows you the level of triathlon now is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because even in triathlon, if you look at it, she's a great, great cyclist in triathlon, but there's a bunch of women who ride with her, you know what I mean? Yeah. So, it's like, any of those. Right. And we're seeing that in some other federations, like the women, when they hop into individual cycling races or time trials, they're winning it for their countries, So it's pretty impressive how Morgan was 4th at U.S.A. cross country nationals this winter. And he was just in the middle of base cycle training, but it just shows you how good of a runner he is,
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Hey, Brian, really good luck in Paris. Thanks so much for giving us some time in this crucial lead up.
Yeah, thanks.
Good luck. Good luck to all the athletes.
No, thanks. Appreciate it.
Hey, Erin Carson, thanks so much for joining me on the CoachCast. I've actually never had you on before, which I feel really embarrassed about, but I've been seeing you a bunch lately. So really, thanks a lot for joining us today.
No, it's my pleasure. I love what you guys are doing, and I love being part of the team. So thank you.
Well, you're right down the road in Boulder. So tell us more about your business, ECFIT.
Well, short version is, I think it was 2012 that I started working with Timothy O'Donnell. And 3 weeks after started with Tio, I started with Rinny. So I've been with them for over a decade, and that's just been an enduring relationship, professionally and personally. And as coaches, I think we love both aspects of our jobs. And so I think the street cred and the philosophy around my training really rings true in how they navigated the last 10 years of their careers. And that led also into lots of other relationships with endurance athletes. And I've just had a lot of success with just really high performance humans. You know, they're no doubt they're gifted athletes, and they're making the most of their time on this planet and doing amazing things. And it's just such a privilege to live in a town where you have access to those kinds of humans and those kinds of people. They're so driven. So my business kind of evolved from there so I could help more people.
And you made a niche for yourself for sure. You have a location, right?
Yeah, I've had rally sport for the last 30 years. So after selling that pre-pandemic, and we had big plans to build a training facility that Boulder really deserves that we don't have.
Yeah.
And the pandemic put the kibosh on that. But I think if in a perfect world, a beautiful big pool similar to Scott Carpenter Pool that is privately run, as well as a maybe 25,000 square foot training facility dedicated to strength and endurance. We don't need as many studios as a traditional facility might need, but at the same time, you can dance and do yoga almost anywhere. So those people are massively important to that kind of facility. But we never built it because it wasn't the right thing to do. The pandemic had other plans. And now I can just really focus on coaching. I work out of Black Lab Sports here, but I have lots of friends with lots of studios. I think your strength coach is Chris Lee, and Chris has always been super kind to me and offered me the opportunity to come and work there. But I think his studio, even if I just needed an interim time, he's such a good egg and really supportive of so many people, me included. So I'm super thankful that we have that kind of community here.
Yeah. Besides Tim and Rinny, you have another superstar right now, Taylor Knibb, going to the Olympics, kind of a unique human in that she has qualified for both. Well, she won the U.S.A. cycling time trial championship, which qualified her for the Olympics in time trial and road race. And obviously she had previously qualified for the Olympics in triathlon. So she's doing triathlon mixed relay. So this is,
we don't know about that. We don't know about that yet.
Okay. All right.
She's the U.S.A. I don't know when they'll announce that.
Got it.
We're very hopeful that will be part of the plan, but at the same time, there's 3 really strong women on the team, and they'll make the best decision. But at this point, Taylor's qualified for the individual triathlon in Paris and the time trial for the cycling.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
Absolutely.
It's just really, she's wonderful.
Now, I mean, it just shows you how fast the triathletes are these days. When she is number 1 in the nation for time trialing, going to the Olympics for cycling events. But yet there's other strong cyclists in her field within triathlon. So it just shows you the level, how much that's gone up over the last, is that 5 years, 10 years?
She will cause it to keep going up because everybody's going to have to get smarter and stronger to be able to ride with her. And then, but first and foremost, they have to believe that they can because she's so good. And she just races with so much freedom and herself. She's riding within herself. She's a brilliant mind within that athlete as well. And but if you look, Lisa Norden is the Swedish national time trial champion, Paula Findlay. And I think that cycling, it might be a little uncomfortable with these triathletes winning their time trial championships, but it shows you, I think, the beauty of triathlon because the strength of building the engine in the pool without stress. The physical stress would be different in the pool. And also the ability to run and put stress into bone and into tissue that connects to bone, that there might be an upside to a cyclist maybe going for a run every now and then, to make sure that their ability to produce and reduce force, it's worth listening to, especially in a country. I grew up in Canada, so I am a dual citizen, but I think in the United States, for Taylor Knibb as a triathlete, her second time trial competition was a national championship performance.
Wow.
And it won't surprise me if her third time trial championship perhaps produces an Olympic medal.
No, it's interesting. So, I just thought about that.
Yeah.
I realized that Tom Pidcock is a big, pro cyclist in the Tour de France. He won L'Alpe d'Huez. He's reigning mountain bike world champion, cyclocross world champion, and he does regular runs. We also have one of the Yates brothers on Team UAE did a 2:30 marathon in Valencia over the winter, and he's
nice.
in the Tour de France. So it is kind of striking that you would have heard of such a thing a decade ago. That would have just been so horrible. You would have ruined your chances, but things are changing all arounders now for sure. How long have you been working with Taylor?
Taylor started working with me through when she was with Neil Henderson.
Mm-hmm.
I used to work with a lot of Neil's athletes, and he introduced me to Taylor. Keep in mind, I'm a strength coach.
Yeah.
These guys are all head coaches, sport coaches.
Right.
And so that was where our relationship began when Taylor first started coming out here for the summers and training when she was at Cornell. So I think for us full time, we've been together 3 years that she's lived in Boulder full time.
Okay.
So I get to see her a few times a week.
Okay.
Before that, would see her in the summers, and then her coaches at Cornell would take care of it in the off season.
Yeah. So what's her team look like now? Team of coaches.
Head coach is Dan Lorang, it's been really fun to sit back and witness the building of that relationship, and that relationship hopefully will endure for a long time. It's really a beautiful thing to watch and be part of. Her swim coach has been Julie Dibbins, and Julie is masterful.
Yeah.
Obviously has a very, very good acumen in triathlon and all of it. And is capable of assisting and supporting Taylor in all ways. And then her run coach is Lawrence Van Langen. And he has played a beautiful role in just keeping her healthy and really confident in how she approaches training and racing and overall life. And then I do the strength and work with all of them. We all work together and communicate really, really well for Taylor. Yeah. We're there for her.
Huh.
So
what does that kind of communication look like? Is it just when issues pop up, or is it regular check-ins? I mean, how much do you understand what Dan is prescribing? Also, TrainingPeaks involvement. Are you reviewing, seeing what she's planned workouts upcoming?
As strength coach with all of my athletes, and I have a few professionals that I work with, having access to their TrainingPeaks is incredibly helpful. I don't comment on their TrainingPeaks unless it's something really relevant or something I see. But I do see that as, and I used this word the other day with the panel that we were on, that to me as a strength coach, the TrainingPeaks relationship is a sacred space for the head coach and the athlete, and should be treated as such. That's where they feel safe and they can communicate. And so that communication is so it's so raw sometimes, because these athletes are working so hard, and it's emotional, and it can be intellectual, and it can be not always FTPs and heart rates and body sensors and
the soft
data,
skills, how you felt. So, what's going on in your life. So that space is pretty exclusively for Dan and Taylor. But I do follow it because it helps me understand my programming and what she needs. If he hasn't really given me a lot of, she's just doing so well that we're in a very, very good spot. My role right now is to keep her consistent, keep nothing new, keep things very simple. And try to use any bit of energy that she has in it. Every single thing we do has a purpose, and
and it's understood by the whole team, and we trust each other. So that's how the TrainingPeaks is exclusively with Dan, and he's in Germany. I mean, it would be so amazing if he could be here more, and because I would welcome him in any of my sessions. Any of the coaches can come to any of the sessions.
Yeah.
So we're able to do that and not be disruptive. We also have a WhatsApp group that we all check in, and
okay.
both good feedback and also areas of concern, or ways that we can support Taylor.
All right.
I think we would probably be well served to have another chat where she's not involved, where she doesn't have to think about what we as her coaches are also. She's actually made it really clear a couple of times. She's like, there's things I don't need to know. Just don't tell me.
Yeah.
She's,
every athlete's
these guys
unique.
work so hard.
Yeah. Well, I try to get Dan on as well, but of course he also coaches a Tour de France cycling team, which is this thing happening in France as well. So he's like, I cannot do this, and I'm happy to, after the Olympics. So hopefully get him on shortly too. Talk to me about like assessment, starting with a new athlete or Taylor, what kind of, how do you go about assessing where to even start in the world? There's a million different ways you can go, right? So what's your process look like?
Assessment has been for about the last decade in strength and conditioning a very, very interesting topic. You can bust out the goniometer and start to measure joint angles. You can start measuring hip extension and hip flexion, and many coaches are very successful doing it that way. I would prefer to, and I use an NASM protocol, National Academy of Sports Medicine, as kind of a viewpoint, but I'm not a big technical measurer of people, because I just believe that what is happening today might not be who you were yesterday, and it's probably not who you are tomorrow. And our bodies have the ability to carry emotion, dehydration, fatigue in all different ways. So to spend an hour and a half or 2 hours assessing, I'm capable of doing it. I just haven't really seen the value. So my process is more, we're going to do this very simple program for 4 weeks. As long as you're healthy, a healthy athlete. So we can talk about a athlete that has areas of concern later, but a healthy athlete who's performing and progressing in the sport. And I come in, then I'm going to come in a very gentle way. And for the first 4 weeks, we're just going to keep it very simple. And the goal is consistency, is to establish a schedule that works for everybody, to ensure that I understand the training loads that the athlete can actually handle, that does not interfere with their sport performance and their sport training. And I also look at that opportunity for the first 4 weeks to build trust with the sport coach, that the work that I'm going to do with the athlete will be supportive, not interfere in any way with that athlete's energy ability to perform. So those first 4 weeks are really we're just starting to get to dance together a little bit and build trust. The second chunk of time, by then we've really started to truthfully unpack where we're starting to see some opportunities with the athletes. And I'm really careful with my words there. I don't see weaknesses. I just see opportunities. And so once we start identifying those opportunities in the next 4 to 8 weeks, we start to dial in where we can make a positive impact for that athlete. And that doesn't always mean, and it usually doesn't mean more weight. It usually means different kind of mobility drills. It means more consistency with very simple loading patterns. And so there's no magic. It's just a matter of making sure that the athlete wants to show up and come to the session, and that they're excited about the session, and that they see and understand how the movements and the loading strategies that we're using are positively impacting their ability to do their sport.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's a big goal of mine.
Yeah, I like where you start in terms of like, let's build the habit first, and that schedule and that routine, then you can build from there. So it's not just haphazard, that it actually gets ingrained. What about, you also mentioned not interfering with the main sport, but could there be times whereby, okay, we're in the down season or whatever type of year it might be focus wise, and it's like, hey, this is the time to maybe shift focus to more strength?
Absolutely, because most of the time when they're in season, you're just maintaining strength. You're really trying to keep them healthy and balanced.
Right.
Those two things, amazingly important. Keep them healthy and keep them balanced. Repetitive motion sports do tend to overload a certain system or a muscular system or a part of the body or create tightness. And you you need to have a plan that's going to keep them balanced.
Yeah.
So it does involve in building strength, but it just might not be the most typical way of doing it. So this is an interesting year because the World Championships, the 70.3 World Championships, because I do train a lot of triathletes, aren't until December. And that would be typically when we would be going into an off season. And so with the concept of progressive overload, it has always been very clear to me for over a decade. As a strength coach, I very rarely get to do that. And that is the essence of what I do.
Yeah.
So it's like, no, stop doing that. Because if a strength coach is seeking progressive overload in loading strategies, you will negatively impact sport performance. It's very difficult to have both at the same time. So we will throughout the year find times, maybe it's 2 weeks, maybe it's 4 weeks, when we can impose demands from a greater perspective to build lower body strength, to enhance posture, to build the backline strength within the season. But more often than not, that's going to come in the off season.
Yeah.
And the opportunity when the sport coach, they're taking a little breather. There's no big races coming up in the foreseeable future. And it's okay if the athlete experiences a little bit of discomfort, maybe a little bit. It's the opportunity to raise the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's assume you work more hands-on during that off-season time period, but then travel, racing really picks up. How are you managing that remote? I mean, I assume you've checked out the new TrainingPeaks strength solutions to help with that.
I love the new TrainingPeaks strength solutions.
Awesome.
It is really exciting. I think there's a few different things that are really exciting about it, because the strength of that is going to be for me in the off season, right? Because then the loading strategies can be very specific.
Oh, right.
The sets, the reps, the loads that I want to impose for the athlete. Because when we're not in season, I use a very general field. How does that feel? Oh, it feels good. Okay, let's do 10 of those.
Right.
Or, so I do believe in heavy loading with athletes that have good training. They have training skill. They've been doing this for a while. But more often than not, they're fearful and they don't want to lift loads that will make them sore. Yeah. They do not want to be sore. Yeah. So as a strength coach, you have to be really, really careful there. So I think as we get going with TrainingPeaks, I will probably shift almost everything I do into the TrainingPeaks programs because they're just so cleanly laid out. I don't know why everybody has to overcomplicate it. You guys made it really simple. Simple is awesome. One of my favorite things.
Well, then other folks like Dan Lorraine can see it.
100%, right?
Oh, and you mentioned mobility, but tell us about your theory thought around mobility versus strength. Are you doing more mobility every day versus strength? Like, how does that work within your programming?
It is. If you're a good strength coach, your answer is always, it depends. Yeah. So it depends. It depends on the athlete. It depends on the time of year. It depends. Sometimes you're just giving them things to do because I don't know what it is. I'm going to go gender here, gender specific. It seems like my female athletes always want to do more. Mm. And my male athletes are like, I don't want to do more. Mm. So with the females, a lot of times, if you can give them a very structured mobility movement oriented, low energy ask, they love it and they will do it twice. Mm. So mobility for me is not energy expensive. It wants to be useful and meaningful. And it will also give the athlete maybe a little bit of a mental and emotional edge that they're doing work, but they're not doing work. Like I used to watch athletes leave a session with me and go do a bunch of planks or sit-ups or feel like they needed to do more. And I was just like, can you just go home now, take a shower and go eat? With the boys, I do have to check in with them a little bit more. Did you do your mobility today? This is important. Right. And it just might be the difference in how they view their worlds. Huh. So movement, we have a huge opportunity with movement. But I look at the assignments from a 4Q perspective. The 4 quadrants that I use are, there's unloaded linear movements, there's loaded linear movements, there's unloaded non-linear movements, and there's non-loaded linear movements. So everything we do will fit into one of those 4 quadrants. And I have to be careful to not overload one quadrant.
Yeah. Wow. So what might Taylor be doing if she's going to be in the Olympic Village for quite a while? Is it a daily routine? Is it just pure maintenance? Is she doing anything at all on the strength side?
She's a great communicator. Taylor makes it very clear what she may or may not need. Everything, there will be nothing new that comes into her program before the Olympics, starting probably 2 weeks ago. Everything is very simple. She knows if her body, she's very aware of her body. So if something feels tight, she'll reach out to either me or Lawrence or I, or however you might say that. And together we'll come up with a solution to help her get back to a good movement pattern if she comes out of pattern for some reason. But with the Zoom, we can do Zoom super easily. The pandemic did give us a lot of good technology.
Yeah.
So she'll have daily mobility to do, but if some red flag shows up for her, she knows who to call.
Yeah. And finally here, what makes an Olympian? Is it the DNA, the grit? What are the components that really are special that makes the Olympian different from non-Olympians?
What a fabulous question. Because here in the United States, we've been able to watch the trials,
Right. Oh yeah. Love it.
And being so close to someone who made it, who has the opportunity. And I know Morgan really well too. And I couldn't be happier for both Morgan and Taylor, who didn't leave it up to the judges. They went out and took on the challenge, and both of them had to race for their lives to get the early selection, right, and secure it for themselves and give themselves the time and the lack of stress. The genetics, yes, I believe that the world has become so athletically amazing that you have to start with some good DNA. And I rode with Taylor's mother this morning. We came down from Jamestown, and she goes, I think we went pretty fast. And I was just right on Mom's wheel. So I'm on her wheel, like maybe even too close. Yeah. And she goes, we did pretty good. We came down like 43 K per hour. And I'm like, is that fast? Like, is that pretty good? And then I got on Strava and I'm like, yeah, we're ahead of Ruth Winder. This is pretty good. We went 13th women overall.
Nice.
Year, so
nice.
It's, so I know that the genetics are in place. Taylor's really, really smart. She's not just intelligent. She's also emotionally intelligent. And I give her a lot of credit. I've been really blessed to be with her for quite a while, and I hope I get to be with her for a lot longer. Because as coaches, we're never guaranteed the next race. But as a coach, I try to do everything I can do to stay in position to be in play, and I just love being around her. She's tenacious. She's exact in the work. That's why having a coach like Dan is so great for Taylor, because she trusts him, and they're slowly building this beautiful relationship where she's got so much room, Dirk, to even get better, which is amazingly scary.
Absolutely.
So there's a level of patience and understanding that I think is hard to find in athletes, that, knowing your time will come, and she's so good, but she's never satisfied, but it doesn't keep her up at night that she's not good enough. Like she knows that she'll get better. That's and funny. She surrounds herself with people who care deeply about her. So I would imagine that if anybody's going to the Olympics, They've dreamed a dream. They realized at some point in their career that it could be real.
Yeah.
I'm good enough.
Yeah.
I'm good enough that it's going to be real. And then they tick all the right boxes. They sacrifice things. And they are handsomely rewarded in the end.
Yeah. It's interesting. You said never satisfied. It can, there are those stars that kind of reach the pinnacle, but then it's not as great as what they thought it would be. And they have a big downturn and going to, the worst of cases, whatever, depression, et cetera. But like having that, it's not like always the end goal. Like you can always keep improving. And I think of this great story about Ryan Bolton. My father coached Ryan to the Sydney Olympics, very first Olympics with triathlon in it. And Ryan did not have a great day. So my dad was on the sidelines in Sydney, just like not looking forward to this phone call, like after the race, like, cause he thought he'd just be depressed. And the first thing Ryan said was, "Hey, Joe, there's nothing on my TrainingPeaks workout plan for next week."
Yep.
And
good for him.
Cause like Ryan's head turned to long course, from after that Olympic experience. So it was just like the example of like never satisfied, and I can keep improving. And there's another area to go, or maybe a different sport, a different aspect of the sport. So that's just like, wow, all right, let's get after it. Let's go to Ironman.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And I know Ryan, and he's so supportive of the athletes that he gets to be around as well. And I know he sees his role with U.S.A. as quite a privilege. I got to hang out with Ryan a little bit while Taylor was in the wind tunnel, which was amazing experience for me, because looking for all these little edges and looking for those opportunities to find more speed.
Yeah.
And he's a really cool guy and a great coach, and obviously a great athlete as well.
Well, it's obviously not just at the elite levels. It's harder and harder to go to Kona or go to Nice or go to 70.3 Worlds. Like every single year gets incrementally harder. That level of competition rises. So folks like yourself are becoming more and more important. It's not just about the X's and O's of today's intervals, but it's the other 22 hours of the day, that really kind of make the champions.
Being a strength coach is we're lucky because I get to see them a lot. The ones that live local.
Yeah.
The ones that don't live local, I can use TrainingPeaks. I can use a long form video format to really support athletes around the world. But you do get to see, when you get to see them in person, that's really, 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 I feel that's never lost on me, that's a huge advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, you got a great role to play. Thanks so much. We're looking forward to the Olympics, and good luck with all your athletes.
Thanks, Dirk. Thanks for all you do for so many people.
Thank you.
Even us age groupers can act like pros when we have a product like TrainingPeaks. Thank you.
It's just what I don't know. It's what I do. It's fun. It's always been fun. So thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to the TrainingPeaks CoachCast. Visit trainingpeaks.com for more training and coaching resources.